The observation deck of Meridian 7 had never felt quite so inadequate. Dr. Ethan Cross stood with his hands clasped behind his back, trying to project an air of calm professionalism while his heart hammered against his ribs like it was attempting a jailbreak. Through the reinforced polymer viewport, the ethery vessel hung in the black like a pearl dropped into ink. It was beautiful in a way that made human engineering look like we'd been building spaceships with our eyes closed and one hand tied behind our backs. "They're definitely showing off," muttered Jenkins from behind him. "Nobody needs a ship that looks like it's made of frozen starlight." Ethan couldn't disagree. The vessel seemed to shift colors as it rotated slowly in the void, catching the distant sun and throwing it back in shades that didn't have names in any human language. 3 months ago, they'd received the first transmission. 2 months ago, the linguistics team had suffered a collective nervous breakdown trying to decode a language that apparently used harmonics humans couldn't even hear without equipment. 3 weeks ago, they'd finally managed to communicate that yes, we'd love to meet you, please don't judge us by our reality television broadcasts. And now they were here. "Docking sequence initiated," announced the station's AI in that calm, slightly bored tone that suggested it was deeply unimpressed by first contact with an alien civilization. "Atmospheric pressure equalization in progress. Gravitational alignment at 97%. Ethan tugged at his collar. The International Space Council had insisted on formal attire for the occasion, which meant he was wearing an actual tie in zero gravity. Whoever made that decision had clearly never tried to keep a tie from floating into their face during the most important moment in human history. "Remember," said Dr. Sarah Chen, adjusting her own suit jacket with nervous fingers, "we smile, but not too much. Don't want them to think we're baring our teeth. And for God's sake, nobody mentioned the probe incident." "What probe incident?" asked Jenkins. "Exactly." The docking clamps engaged with a deep, resonant thud that Ethan felt through the deck plating. Somewhere in the station's guts, pressure seals hissed and atmosphere exchanged. He'd read the reports a dozen times. The ethery breathed oxygen, tolerated similar gravity, could survive in Earth's temperature range. They were, by all biological measures, remarkably compatible with humans. Some of the more excitable xenobiologists had written papers suggesting parallel evolution or ancient panspermia. Others had simply gotten drunk and declared the universe had a sense of humor. "Airlock cycle complete," the AI announced. "Our guests are entering the station." Ethan's mouth went dry. He'd practiced his greeting speech so many times that Sarah had threatened to space him if she heard it once more. He'd memorized the cultural briefing, limited though it was. He'd even done breathing exercises that his sister swore by, though all they'd accomplished was making him dizzy. The airlock door slid open with a whisper of hydraulics. What emerged first was not, as Ethan had expected, some sort of honor guard or armed escort or even a nervous diplomat. Instead, a woman stepped through, and for a moment his brain simply stalled. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet, dressed in garments that seemed to flow like liquid metal, shifting from deep violet to silver as she moved. Her hair was the color of moonlight on water, falling in waves past her shoulders. Her face was angular, with high cheekbones and large eyes that held depths of color he couldn't quite name. And her ears rose to elegant points, elongated and graceful, like nature had decided that human ears were a rough draft that needed refinement. She was, despite everything alien about the situation, breathtakingly beautiful. "I am Princess Lyra of the Ethery Sovereignty," she said, and her voice carried a musical quality, each word seemingly accompanied by harmonics that resonated in Ethan's chest. "I bring greetings from the Celestial Throne and the Three Systems." Ethan's carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. What came out instead was, "Hi. Wow. I mean, welcome. We're really glad you're not here to vaporize us or anything." Sarah made a strangled sound beside him. Princess Lyra's head tilted slightly, those enormous eyes studying him with an intensity that made him feel like a specimen under glass. Behind her, 3 other Etheri had emerged, all tall, all elegant, all regarding the human welcoming committee with expressions that could charitably be called diplomatic curiosity and less charitably called barely concealed concern. "Vaporize," Lyra repeated, and the translator device at her throat hummed softly. "To reduce to vapor. To destroy utterly." She paused. "This is humor. Your species uses the acknowledgement of potential violence as a form of social bonding." "Only when we're nervous," Ethan said, finally finding his footing. "Dr. Ethan Cross, Xenobiology Division. On behalf of Earth and the orbital territories, we welcome you to Meridian 7. I promise the accommodations are better than my opening line." Something flickered across Lyra's face. It might have been amusement. It was hard to tell when your entire diplomatic experience consisted of trade negotiations with the Mars colonies, and they were just difficult, not alien. "We accept your welcome, Dr. Cross," Lyra said. "And we hope that our presence here marks the beginning of understanding between our peoples. Though I confess, your greeting has already taught me something valuable about humanity." "What's that?" "That you face the unknown with laughter." Her ears twitched slightly, a movement that Ethan suspected carried meaning he didn't understand. "We shall have to learn if this is wisdom or madness." "Why not both?" Ethan suggested, and was rewarded with what he was almost certain was an Etheri smile. The conference room had been designed for 12 humans in reasonable comfort. With the Etheri delegation present, it felt like trying to host a dinner party in a closet. Princess Lyra sat across from Ethan, her posture impossibly straight, while her advisors flanked her like particularly elegant bookends. The translator devices hummed softly, creating an ambient buzz that made Ethan think of distant bees. "So," Ethan said, pulling up a holographic display of Earth's solar system, "this is home. 8 planets, 1 star that we're reasonably fond of, and enough space debris to make navigation interesting." He expanded the image. "We've established colonies on Mars, mining operations in the asteroid belt, and research stations around Jupiter's moons. Nothing as impressive as your 3-system sovereignty, but we're working on it." Lyra leaned forward, her eyes tracking the slowly rotating planets. "You spread yourselves across your star system before achieving faster-than-light travel. This is unusual. Most species consolidate their homeworld first." "Yeah, well, humans have this thing about putting all our eggs in one basket," Jenkins chimed in from the back. "Turns out when your species spends half its history trying to blow itself up, you start thinking about backup plans." One of Lyra's advisors, a stern-faced man whose name translated to something like, "Keeper of Harmonious Protocol," made a sound that the translator rendered as disapproval. Lyra's ears, however, twitched in that way Ethan was beginning to recognize as interest. "Your species has a violent history," Lyra said. It wasn't a question. "Present too, if we're being honest," Ethan admitted. "But we're working on it. Therapy is cheaper than warships. Usually." The 3-hour briefing session that followed tested Ethan's ability to make xenobiology sound interesting. He needn't have worried. Lyra asked questions about everything from Earth's tectonic activity to why humans insisted on keeping small carnivorous animals in their homes. Her advisors took extensive notes on devices that appeared to be grown rather than built, organic technology that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. When they finally broke for what the schedule optimistically called lunch, Ethan found himself walking beside Lyra through the station's central corridor. Her advisors trailed at a respectful distance, though Keeper of Harmonious Protocol looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. "Your station is cramped," Lyra observed, ducking slightly to avoid a junction of overhead piping. "Do all humans live in such confined spaces?" "Only the lucky ones who get to work in orbit," Ethan said. "Down on Earth, we've got oceans, mountains, forests. Plenty of room to spread out. Up here, every cubic meter costs about the same as a small house. Curious. The Etheri prefer open spaces. Our vessels are designed with gardens, meditation chambers, and what you might call recreational areas." She paused at a viewport, looking out at the curve of Earth below. Your world is beautiful. So much water. Our homeworld has seas, but nothing like this. You're welcome to visit sometime, Ethan said. I know some great beaches. Though fair warning, Earth gravity is no joke if you're not used to it. They reached the residential module, where Sarah was conducting an impromptu tour of the living quarters. The sleeping pods were stacked 3 high, each barely large enough for a bunk, a locker, and the kind of personal space that would make a sardine claustrophobic. These are your sleeping chambers? Lyra asked, peering into one of the open pods with what Ethan interpreted as horror. Home sweet home, Sarah said cheerfully. Though I'll admit it's not exactly palatial. We've been trying to secure funding for larger quarters, but apparently the Space Council thinks scientists don't need luxuries like elbow room. Lyra turned to her advisors, speaking in rapid ethery. The musical language rose and fell, and even without translation, Ethan could hear the concern in her voice. Keeper of Harmonious Protocol responded with what sounded like reassurances, though his expression suggested he was no happier about the accommodations than she was. I apologize, Lyra said, switching back to translated speech. In my culture, offering inadequate space to guests is considered deeply disrespectful. I did not mean to suggest your hospitality is lacking. No offense taken, Ethan said. We know it's not the Ritz. But hey, at least you get your own pod. When I first joined the station, I had to share with Jenkins, and let me tell you, that man snores like a malfunctioning thruster. I do not, Jenkins protested from down the corridor. You absolutely do. We had to file a noise complaint with the AI. Lyra's ears twitched again, more pronounced this time. You find humor in discomfort. This continues to fascinate me. Ethery would find such conditions distressing. Where will your delegation sleep? Sarah asked. We've prepared the guest quarters in Module 7, but I'll admit they're not much bigger than what we've got. The Keeper of Harmonious Protocol stepped forward, his translator device humming. Her Highness will require appropriate accommodations befitting her station. The chamber must have proper circulation, meditation space, and privacy protocols. Right, Sarah said, pulling up her tablet and scrolling through the station schematic. So that's none of our available spaces. Fantastic. She looked at Ethan with an expression that clearly said this is your problem now. Any ideas? Ethan studied the layout, doing mental calculations. The VIP suite was occupied by Ambassador Morrison, who would probably rather die than give up his quarters. The laboratory modules were full of equipment. The observation deck didn't have sleeping facilities. Every viable space was accounted for, assigned, and completely inadequate for hosting alien royalty. Well, Ethan said, going for levity because the alternative was panic, Your Highness, if we run out of rooms, I suppose you could always crash in my quarters. Plenty of space in my bed. He grinned at Sarah, who rolled her eyes. The translator hummed. Lyra's expression shifted into something thoughtful, her large eyes fixing on Ethan with sudden intensity. You offer to share your sleeping space? I mean, it was a joke, but technically yes. My pod's the same size as everyone else's, which is to say slightly larger than a coffin, but if things get really desperate, we could probably. Lyra held up a hand, silencing him. She turned to her advisors, speaking rapidly in Ethery. The Keeper's eyes widened. The other 2 advisors exchanged glances that even Ethan could read as significant. Is everything okay? Sarah asked, her voice tight with the kind of concern that preceded interstellar incidents. Dr. Cross, Lyra said slowly, among the Ethery, an offer to share one's sleeping quarters is not made lightly. It is a gesture of profound trust and alliance. You would extend this to me? Ethan felt the blood drain from his face as he realized what he'd just done. I meant it as a joke. Human humor. The thing we do when we're uncomfortable. Lyra's ears were fully erect now, practically quivering. You jest about matters of such significance. Apparently, Ethan said weakly. The keeper of harmonious protocol spoke urgently to Lyra, but she waved him off, her gaze never leaving Ethan's face. When she finally spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the air itself seem to vibrate. I accept your offer, Dr. Cross. The emergency meeting in the station commander's office had the frantic energy of a bomb disposal team realizing they'd brought the wrong wire cutters. Commander Patricia Walsh sat behind her desk looking like she'd aged 5 years in the last 20 minutes, while Ethan stood in front of her feeling like a student called to the principal's office for accidentally starting a small fire. A very diplomatic, potentially civilization-altering small fire. Let me see if I understand this correctly, Walsh said, her voice dangerously calm. You offered to share your sleeping quarters with an alien princess. As a joke. In my defense, Ethan said, I didn't know their culture treats that like proposing a strategic alliance. And she accepted. Enthusiastically, yes. Walsh pressed her fingers to her temples. Dr. Chen, please tell me there's a way out of this that doesn't torpedo first contact. Sarah, who'd been furiously consulting with the xenoanthropology team via tablet, looked up with an expression that suggested the news wasn't good. I've been reading everything we have on Ethery customs, which admittedly isn't much. But from what we can piece together, the bond of quarters is apparently a big deal. Like, carved into stone tablets 3,000 years ago level of big deal. How big? Walsh asked. It's traditionally how their nobility established trust with foreign dignitaries. Sharing sleeping space demonstrates vulnerability, creates obligation, and signals that both parties are willing to be, and I'm translating loosely here, unguarded in each other's presence. Ethan felt his stomach drop somewhere around his knees. So when I joked about her crashing in my pod, you accidentally initiated a formal diplomatic protocol that probably predates human writing, Sarah finished. On the bright side, the keeper of harmonious protocol seems to think you did it on purpose, which means he's interpreting this as a surprisingly sophisticated diplomatic maneuver rather than a catastrophic misunderstanding. And if I explain it was just a joke? Walsh and Sarah exchanged looks. The cultural briefing is pretty clear on this, Sarah said carefully. Refusing the bond after offering it would be interpreted as betrayal. We're talking potential interstellar incident. Wars have started over less. Great, Ethan said. Fantastic. So my choices are share a coffin-sized sleeping pod with alien royalty or potentially trigger a diplomatic crisis that makes the Cold War look like a mild disagreement. Pretty much, Sarah confirmed. Walsh stood, moving to the viewport where the Ethery ship still hung like an accusation in the void. How long are they planning to stay? Another 72 hours, Sarah said. The bond of quarters traditionally lasts the duration of the visit. 3 days. Walsh turned back to Ethan. You think you can share quarters with Princess Lyra for 3 days without causing an interstellar incident? I once spent 2 weeks in a research submarine with Jenkins and didn't commit murder, Ethan said. How much harder could this be? Jenkins doesn't represent an advanced civilization capable of faster-than-light travel and potentially devastating military technology, Walsh pointed out. Fair point. The door chimed. Walsh called for entry, and one of the Ethery advisors glided in, the younger one whose name translated to something like Speaker of Concordant Truths. He bowed slightly, his long ears dipping forward in what their limited cultural database suggested was a gesture of respect. Commander Walsh, Dr. Cross, he said, his translator rendering his musical speech into clipped English. Her Highness wishes to discuss the arrangements for the bond of quarters. She understands your living spaces are limited and wishes to ensure proper protocols are observed. Protocols, Ethan repeated weakly. The sharing of quarters requires certain accommodations. Privacy seals must be respected. Daily rituals must be allowed. And both parties must demonstrate good faith through the exchange of personal truths. The advisor's expression, already difficult to read, became somehow more formal. It is not a trivial undertaking, Dr. Cross. Among my people, the bond of quarters has forged alliances that lasted centuries. It has also revealed incompatibilities that prevented disastrous unions. No pressure then, Ethan muttered. Walsh shot him a look that could have stripped paint. Please assure Her Highness that Dr. Cross understands the significance of what he's offered and is honored to fulfill this custom. The advisor bowed again and departed, leaving a silence that felt like the space between a lightning strike and thunder. I need to clean my quarters, Ethan said finally. There's 3 weeks of laundry on the floor and I'm pretty sure something in my food locker has achieved sentience. You have 2 hours, Walsh said. Use them wisely. And Ethan? Try not to start any wars. The next 90 minutes passed in a blur of frantic activity. Ethan stuffed dirty clothes into the recycler, wiped down every surface, and tried to figure out how to make a space barely large enough for one person remotely suitable for hosting alien royalty. Jenkins helped, mostly by offering unhelpful suggestions and laughing at regular intervals. You could put up some mood lighting, Jenkins suggested, watching Ethan attempt to organize his bookshelf. Maybe some scented candles. Really set the ambience. This is a diplomatic arrangement, not a date, Ethan said, shoving a stack of technical manuals into a locker. Sure. That's why you've reorganized that shelf 3 times. I'm trying to make a good impression on behalf of humanity. Right. Nothing to do with the fact that she's gorgeous and you've been stammering every time she looks at you. Ethan threw a rolled-up sock at him. Don't you have somewhere else to be? And miss this? Not a chance. Sarah appeared in the doorway carrying what looked like extra bedding and a portable partition screen. Xenoanthropology team sent these. Apparently Etheri value some degree of private space even when sharing quarters. The screen sets up magnetically. And these are neural-neutral fabrics, shouldn't trigger any sensory issues. There are sensory issues I should know about. Honestly, we're making this up as we go. But better safe than starting a war because your sheets had the wrong thread count. By the time Princess Lyra arrived at his door, Ethan had transformed his quarters from apocalyptic disaster zone to merely chaotic. The partition screen divided the small space, creating a sleeping area on each side. He'd cleared his desk of everything except his oldest book, a battered copy of Cosmos that had belonged to his grandfather. The air recyclers hummed steadily, and he'd managed to eliminate most evidence that a human had been living here in what could charitably be called bachelor squalor. Lyra stood in the doorway with a small bag that seemed to shift colors in the light. Her 3 advisors clustered behind her, the keeper of harmonious protocol looking like he was attending a funeral. Dar. Cross, Lyra said, her voice carrying those impossible harmonics. I am ready to begin the bond of quarters, if you will receive me. Ethan swallowed hard, suddenly aware that every decision he made for the next 72 hours could alter the course of human history. Welcome to my quarters, Your Highness. They're not much, but they're yours for as long as you need them. Lyra stepped inside, her eyes taking in the cramped space with an expression he couldn't quite read. Her advisors remained in the corridor as the door slid shut, leaving Ethan and an alien princess alone in a room that suddenly felt even smaller than before. So, Ethan said into the silence. This is cozy. Lyra's ears twitched, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled. The first hour passed in awkward silence punctuated by the sounds of 2 beings trying very hard not to acknowledge how strange the situation was. Lyra arranged her belongings with precise movements, placing small objects on the shelf Ethan had cleared. One appeared to be a crystal that pulsed with soft light. Another looked like it might be a plant, except it hummed quietly and its leaves seemed to breathe. That's not going to eat me, is it? Ethan asked, nodding toward the plant thing. Lyra glanced up from her arrangement. The melodies? No, it feeds on sound frequencies. Very calming. Unless you snore as loudly as your colleague Jenkins claims. Ethan laughed, surprised. You heard about that? Your station's acoustics are quite efficient. As are your arguments about thruster maintenance and who finished the coffee rations. Her ears tilted slightly. I have learned much about human nature simply by listening. That's either impressive or terrifying. Both, perhaps. She settled onto the sleeping mat Ethan had prepared, folding her legs beneath her with impossible grace. Dr. Cross, I should explain something about the bond of quarters. It is not merely sharing space. It requires what we call harmonic exchange. That sounds ominous. It means we must speak truthfully with one another. Share aspects of ourselves we would normally keep private. The bond cannot form without vulnerability. She met his eyes, and there was something uncertain there beneath the regal bearing. I realize your offer was made in jest. If you wish to withdraw, I will explain to my people that I misunderstood your customs. Ethan sat down on his own mat, the partition screen between them creating the illusion of privacy in the tiny space. And cause a diplomatic incident? Better a small embarrassment than forcing you into something you did not intend. The kindness in her voice surprised him. For all her alien nature, for all the weight of being a princess from the stars, she seemed genuinely concerned about his comfort. Ethan found himself relaxing slightly. I think we're stuck with each other for the next 3 days, he said. Might as well make the best of it. So, harmonic exchange. Does that mean I'm supposed to tell you my deepest secrets? Not immediately. The bond builds gradually. We might start with something simple. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a note of uncertainty that the translator almost couldn't render. I have never been off my homeworld before this mission. My advisors think I am brave. I am actually terrified. The admission hung in the air between them. Ethan stared at the partition screen, processing the fact that an alien princess had just confessed fear to him. I've never met an alien before yesterday, he offered in return. I spent 6 years studying xenobiology, writing papers about theoretical first contact, and when you walked through that airlock, my entire prepared speech vanished and I made a joke about vaporization. It was a good joke, Lyra said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. It made me less afraid. Yeah. Yes. I thought humans would be stern. Warlike, perhaps, given your history. Instead, you make jokes when you are nervous. You try to ease tension with laughter. This is not weakness, as some of my people believe. I think it is courage. Ethan felt something warm spread through his chest. Your people think we're weak because we joke around. Some do. They see Earth's conflicts, your weapons, your tendency toward aggression. They miss the other side. The art, the music, the way you reach for the stars even knowing how dangerous the universe can be. She shifted, and through the gap in the partition, he caught a glimpse of her profile. I wanted to come here because I wanted to understand. My father, the Emperor, believes in isolation. But I think closing ourselves off from other species is how civilizations die. That's a pretty heavy thing to carry at your age, Ethan said. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? 27 of your years. Young, by Ethery standards, to hold my position. But my father's health is failing, and I will be empress sooner than anyone expected. The melody's plant hummed softly, responding to something in her voice. I must learn to lead before I am ready. I'm 32 and I can barely keep a cactus alive, Ethan said. You're doing better than me. That earned him a laugh, musical and genuine. You humans have a gift for perspective. Tell me, Dr. Cross, why did you become a xenobiologist? What drew you to the study of life you had never seen? Ethan leaned back against the wall, memories surfacing. My grandfather. He used to take me camping when I was a kid, out in the desert where you could see the stars without light pollution. He'd point up at the sky and tell me that somewhere out there, someone was probably looking back. He died before we made first contact, but I'd like to think he knew he was right. He sounds wise. He was. Also stubborn, terrible at cards, and once convinced my grandmother he'd been abducted by aliens to get out of a dinner party. Ethan smiled at the memory. I keep his copy of Cosmos on my desk. Reminds me why I'm up here floating in a tin can instead of doing something sensible planetside. May I see it? Ethan retrieved the book, passing it around the partition. Lyra took it carefully, her long fingers tracing the worn cover. The pages are physical. Made from plant material. We call them books. Ancient technology, but some of us still prefer them to datapads. We have something similar. Memory stones that hold stories in crystalline matrix. She opened the book carefully, studying the words she couldn't read. Your grandfather touched these pages. Held these thoughts. There is something profound in that. He always said books were time machines. Let you hold hands with the past. Lyra looked up, and her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. The Ethri have a saying. The past and future are always speaking, but only the present can hear them both. Your grandfather heard the future, I think. They fell into easier conversation after that. Lyra asked about Earth, about oceans and seasons and why humans insisted on living in places that tried to kill them with weather. Ethan asked about her homeworld, about cities that grew rather than were built, about skies with 2 suns and nights that glowed with bioluminescent clouds. The station's lights dimmed to night cycle, and still they talked, voices low, the partition between them becoming less a barrier and more a comfortable boundary. Dr. Cross, Lyra said eventually, her voice heavy with approaching sleep. Thank you for this. For accepting the bond, even though you did not mean to offer it. I have learned more about humanity in these hours than in all the briefings before we arrived. Call me Ethan, he said. And thank you for not starting a war when I made an idiot of myself. Ethan, she repeated, and his name in her musical voice sounded like something precious. Sleep well. Tomorrow we continue the exchange. Looking forward to it, Your Highness. Lyra, she said softly. If you are Ethan, I am Lyra. The bond requires equals, not titles. Ethan smiled in the darkness. Good night, Lyra. Good night. The melodies hummed gently, and somewhere in the vast station, the universe turned while 2 beings from different stars learned to share the same small space. Morning cycle arrived with artificial sunlight bleeding through the viewport, painting the quarters in shades of gold and amber. Ethan woke to find Lyra already at the window, her profile backlit by Earth's curve hanging in the black like a blue marble someone had tossed into infinity. The melodies had gone silent, its leaves folded in what might have been sleep or contentment. You're up early, Ethan said, his voice rough with sleep. I wanted to see your world from this angle, Lyra said without turning. On my homeworld, we have observation platforms in the mountain ranges where you can watch both suns rise. I thought nothing could match that beauty. I was wrong. Ethan joined her at the viewport, careful to maintain a respectful distance. 3 days of sharing quarters had created a strange intimacy between them, but he was conscious that she was still royalty, still the representative of a civilization that could probably disassemble Earth's military with technology humans hadn't dreamed of yet. Your planet looks fragile from up here, Lyra continued. Like something precious that needs protecting. It is, Ethan agreed. We're working on that. Slowly. Humans aren't great at thinking long-term, but we're learning. The door chimed. Sarah's voice came through the calm. Ethan, I hate to interrupt, but the Keeper of Harmonious Protocol is requesting a meeting with you and Princess Lyra. Says it's about the bond of quarters. Lyra's ears flattened slightly, a gesture Ethan had learned meant concern. He has been troubled by our arrangement from the beginning. He believes I lowered myself by accepting quarters with someone outside the nobility. Fantastic, Ethan muttered. Nothing like class warfare to spice up first contact. They found the Keeper waiting in the conference room, his expression as warm as a tax audit. The other advisors flanked him, though Speaker of Concordant Truths at least managed a slight nod of acknowledgement. Commander Walsh sat at the head of the table looking like she'd rather be anywhere else, including the vacuum of space. Dr. Cross, the keeper began, his translator rendering his tone as deeply formal, the bond of quarters you have shared with Her Highness has been observed by our delegation. We have monitored the harmonic frequencies, the exchange patterns, the behavioral protocols. That's not creepy at all, Ethan said. Walsh kicked him under the table. And we have reached a conclusion. The keeper paused, and for a moment Ethan thought he saw the end of his career, possibly followed by an interstellar incident that would make the history books for all the wrong reasons. The bond is genuine. More than that, it is harmonious. Dr. Cross has shown respect, vulnerability, and what we might call proper resonance with Her Highness. Lyra's ears perked up. Keeper, you approve? Approval is perhaps strong, he said, though something in his stern expression had softened. But I acknowledge that this human has fulfilled the requirements of the bond of quarters with more grace than I anticipated. He has treated you as an equal, not as a curiosity or a prize. This speaks well of his character and, perhaps, of humanity. High praise from someone who looked like he was attending my funeral 2 days ago, Ethan said. The keeper's mouth twitched. It might have been a smile. With aliens, it was hard to tell. I have also learned that humans use humor as a shield. It is not disrespect, merely a different way of processing discomfort. This too speaks well of your species. Commander Walsh leaned forward. So we're not looking at a diplomatic incident? On the contrary, Speaker of Concordant Truths said. The successful completion of a bond of quarters is considered highly auspicious. It suggests that deeper cooperation between our peoples is possible. He turned to Lyra. Your Highness, you have done what your father asked. You have learned about humanity. What will you tell him? Lyra stood, her bearing regal despite the rumpled state of her clothes after 3 days in cramped quarters. I will tell him that humans are chaotic, irreverent, and deeply strange. I will tell him they live in spaces that would drive most Etheri to madness, that they joke about their own mortality, that they reach for the stars before they have solved the problems of their own world. She paused, and her eyes found Ethan's. And I will tell him that they are worth knowing. That in 3 days, one human taught me more about courage and connection than a lifetime of court protocols ever could. The keeper bowed his head. Then the bond of quarters has served its purpose. There's one more thing, Lyra said. She reached into her robes and withdrew a crystal, similar to the one that pulsed in Ethan's quarters but smaller, more intricate. Ethan Cross, by the traditions of my people, a bond of quarters creates an obligation between both parties. We are now bound by trust, and that bond does not end when we part ways. She pressed the crystal into his hand. It was warm, humming with energy that seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. This is a resonance stone, Lyra explained. It is keyed to my own frequency. Across any distance, through any medium, you can reach me. And I can reach you. Should either of us need the other, we need only speak into the stone and our voices will find each other. Ethan stared at the crystal, feeling the weight of what she was offering. Lyra, this is significant, yes. Among my people, resonance stones are given to those we trust completely. Family. Closest advisors. Those we would call upon in our darkest hours. Her hand covered his, warm and alien and somehow familiar. You made a joke about sharing your bed, Ethan Cross. What you accidentally created was something I did not expect to find among the stars. A friend. The word hit harder than Ethan would have thought possible. He'd spent 3 days terrified of causing an incident, of saying the wrong thing, of somehow damaging the fragile bridge between two civilizations. What he'd found instead was someone who watched Earth rise with wonder in her eyes, who laughed at his terrible jokes, who shared stories of her world and listened to his with genuine interest. The feeling's mutual, Ethan said, and was embarrassed to find his voice rough. Though I have to warn you, if you give humans the ability to call you across the galaxy, we're going to use it to send memes and ask what you're having for dinner. Lyra's laugh was pure music. I look forward to it. The ethery vessel departed 6 hours later. Ethan stood at the observation deck with half the station's crew, watching the ship that looked like frozen starlight pull away from Meridian 7. Inside, Lyra would be preparing for the journey home, carrying with her the knowledge that humanity was weird but worth knowing. That seemed like a fair assessment. You did good, Sarah said, appearing beside him. Didn't start a war, didn't cause an incident, and managed to make first contact look almost easy. It wasn't, Ethan said. Every moment I was sure I'd say something that would get us all vaporized. But you didn't. You were yourself. Turns out that was enough. She nudged him. Plus, you've got a direct line to an alien princess. That's going to make you very popular with the xenoanthropology department. The resonance stone pulsed gently in Ethan's pocket. As if responding to his thoughts, it grew warm, and suddenly Lyra's voice filled his head, musical and clear despite the growing distance between them. Ethan. Can you hear me? He pulled out the crystal, speaking into it like the universe's strangest phone call. Loud and clear. Miss me already? I wanted to tell you something I did not say earlier. Your quarters were surprisingly comfortable. The bed was adequate, the company exceptional. He could hear the smile in her voice. Perhaps next time I visit, you will actually sleep in it instead of insisting on taking the floor. Next time. Ethan felt his heart rate kick up. You're planning to come back. My father will want a full report. That could take months. And I may need to verify certain aspects of human culture through extended observation. The crystal hummed with harmonics that suggested laughter. Besides, you promised to show me those beaches. I intend to collect on that debt. Fair enough, Ethan said, grinning at Earth hanging in the viewport. I'll start working on my tour guide credentials. Until then, Ethan Cross. May your stars shine bright. And yours, Lyra. The crystal's glow faded, but its warmth remained. Ethan stood there long after the ethery ship vanished into faster-than-light, long after the crew dispersed back to their duties. He thought about his grandfather pointing at the stars, insisting someone was looking back. He thought about how a stupid joke had turned into 3 days that changed his understanding of the universe. He thought about an alien princess who watched Earth rise and called it beautiful. Jenkins found him an hour later, still standing at the viewport with the crystal in his hand. You know you're going to be impossible to live with now, Jenkins said. Saving first contact, befriending alien royalty, getting a magic space phone. Some of us are trying to maintain humble, normal careers. You could always joke about sharing your bed with the next alien delegation, Ethan suggested. Absolutely not. I saw what that did to you. 3 days of diplomatic stress, sleeping on the floor, and now you're standing here with that dopey look like you just figured out the meaning of life. Maybe I did, Ethan said. He pocketed the crystal and turned to face his friend. Turns out the universe is big, strange, and full of people who are nothing like us and somehow exactly like us at the same time. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very stupid, you make a joke that becomes something real. Philosophical and insufferable, Jenkins said. Yep, you're definitely going to be impossible. But he was smiling, and so was Ethan, and somewhere between Earth and stars humans had only dreamed of reaching, a resonance stone pulsed with the frequency of connection spanning the dark.